Welcome to our research seminar. Let me present our today's speaker. It's Anna Panova, the lecturer at the Faculty of Economic Science and Junior Research Fellow at the International Research Laboratory of Institutional Analysis and Economic Reforms.
Okay, thank you, Maria. Today I'm going to tell you about university governance, and as you may know, in Russia everyone knows how to play football, how to cure illness and how to teach, but I'm going to discuss university governance from a theoretical point of view. And I would like to start with the motivation. University governance is important for several reasons. Higher education is an essential part of our life. It is important not only for individuals, but also for firms and for entire state. And however, not so many scientists try to investigate the consequences of decision making in a university. And moreover, the majority of papers on this topic are descriptive. And this is very different from the situation with analysis of decision making in firms. And so we know quite a lot about decision making in firms, but often this knowledge is useless for university. And so we start our analysis by describing the main features of university. And governance structure of university differs from the governance structure of a big corporation. The main difference is that professors participate in the governance, and from theory we know that participation of employees in governance has negative consequences for firms. But when we consider university, it is important to remember that university is a professional organization. And this organization operates in a situation of asymmetric information. Moreover, market forces play a relative small role for university. And also there is a lack of clear performance indicator, such indicator that tell us or founder of university something about the quality of governance. And we can say that the knowledge of staff, of professors is very important for university. And also the next important feature of universities that university exhibit a wide range of different governance structure. To sum up, we can say that universities are important and they can be governed in different ways. They operate in a specific circumstance, but at the same time we don't know what the consequences of different governance structure. So we have the following question: how does governance structure influence university? And in other words, what is the best for university? But before going deep in this question, we need to say something about related literature. A lot of literature describes the evolution of university governance, compares university governance in different countries, compares a degree of participation of different agents, and at the present the main point of view that the participation of professor is necessary for university. And in attempt to analyze governance structure, scientists scientists identified the following verbal model of governance: collegial model, hierarchical model, political model, and organization anarchy. First models are important, and in the collegial model, all decisions are made by all professors, and this model based on the idea that professors have enough knowledge, they are motivated in governance, they are ready to regulate the work by themselves, and in order to act together they don't need strong hierarchy. And in university with hierarchical governance, all decisions are made by the administrator, and we can say that university is a professional bureaucracy. In political model, all decisions are based on the negotiation. Professors make coalition, and the idea of the interest of different coalitions are implemented in this model instead of one common goal, like in first models. And in organizational anarchy, decisions are made in a random way, and this model based on the idea that university has contradicting purpose, and there is no common structure of preferences in university. So we didn't analyze all these models, but we consider only features of the first two models, and these two models are the opposite side of one scale. So, and also we note that the decision making in university is similar to the decision making in the committees. So it's natural to use the theory of decision making in the committees. And decision making in the committees has several features. Decisions are taken on the basis of the preferences of persons involved in the decision making process, and at the same time the decisions affect as well those who do not participate in the decision-making process. And the most important model for us is the model of Osborne and co-author. And they modeled collective decision-making in the groups. They consider the situation that decision-making is costly. So each member of groups has to decide whether he participates in committees or not. And Osborne investigate the situation, then the favorite outcomes of members group are symmetric with respect to the current outcome. And in contrast to the theory of decision making in committees, for us it is important that the decision impacts not only professors but also the entire university. So we try to look on the university from the point of view of the founder. If the founder has not enough knowledge, if he has to delegate decision making, how could he do this? And and our goal to estimate and compare effectiveness of different governance structure. And now I'm going to describe you my model. First, I describe the setup of my model. Second, I will consider the situation when decisions are made once, and I try to understand what happens under each governance structure. Next, I will try. I find out the preferences of founder about different governance structures. In the case when founder knows only the distribution of preferences of staff, and in the case when he knows the order of preferences of staff. And finally, I investigate the situation when decisions are made several times. So we suppose that in university, we suppose that there is only one university in the economy, and this university is represented by n professors. The founder of university delegates decision-making to professors, and he can delegate decision-making in several ways. He can ask all professors to take part in decision-making. He can choose one professor who would govern university. He can rotate professor, or he can delegate decision-making to a committee. And we constructed two-stage model. In the first stage, professors should make decision about university policy. For example, they should choose the size of awards for different academic activities. And as you know, professors have different preferences about this issue, and each professor has the function of ability to implement the policy. This is a P, and here is X is a policy of university. XI is the ideal policy of the professor I, and this policy gives professor the highest level of ability to implement the policy, and different preferences mean different XI, and B is a coefficient showing how many different policies can carry out one professor. So in the first stage, professors choose university policy according to the government's structure, and after they decided, they make decision about their efforts according to the utility function and according to the policy. And EI is the efforts of professor. Now let us consider what happens under each governance structure, and we compare the following governance structure, the collegial governance, the hierarchical governance with rotation and without rotation, and governance by a committee. And we assume that effectiveness of policy choice is the sum of professors' efforts. So in the case of the hierarchical, university with hierarchical governance is governed by one single professor. This professor takes all decision, and the remaining professors don't take part in decision making. And the university policy depends only on the preferences of this professor. So in this case, we found out that this professor chooses his ideal policy, and all professors apply the level of efforts equal to their ability to implement this policy. And effectiveness of the policy choice in this case depends on the preferences of professor. So he does not take into account the interest of other professors. In case of collegial governance, decisions are made by all professors, and professors make decision independently, and they cannot build. We assume that they cannot build coalitions. They propose their policies, and university policy is chosen by voting. And in this case, we have the following equilibrium profile. So each professor proposes his ideal policy, and the policy of the median professor is chosen in this case. So the effectiveness of policy choice in this case depends on on the preferences of each professor. The mechanism of decision making in committee is similar to the mechanism of decision making in collegial governance. So in this case, we have the following equilibrium profiles, and here each member of committee propose his ideal policy, and the policy of median professor of the committee is chosen. So in this case, effectiveness of the policy choice depends on the professors that take part in the committee. So and now we are going to compare this different governance structure. Yes?
Sorry, what is 2k plus 1?
Okay. No, it means that k is an odd number.
Okay.
Yes, it just that's why. Okay, so and so we suppose that the founder doesn't have enough knowledge, enough information about the preferences of professors. So he has to delegate governance decision. He has to delegate decision making to the professors. So we found out that in this case the preferences of the founder is the following: the collegial governance is better than other governance structure, and the hierarchical governance is a versus governance structure. Yeah, decision making by a committee is second best in this case. So we can also find out what happened in this situation when founder knows the order of ideal policy. For example, he knows that my interest is close to Ilya's interest, but our interests are far away from interest of Sonia, for example. Yeah. And in this case, hierarchical governance by the median professor leads to the same results as a collegial governance, and but the worst situation is when the founder appoints extreme professors in this case. So, yeah.
I didn't get this. What are the preferences of the founder?
No, we try to understand what the preference of the founder, but we think that for founder is important that professors apply the largest level of ability. So we compare this different governance structure by the expected sum of efforts of professors.
Mm-hmm. Efforts in what?
To implement the policy, to write papers. So you know that you will receive awards for the paper, so you try to implement.
Can you show the slide where you specify?
This?
Mm-hmm.
What? Okay. Yeah.
So, what's their functionals? Last thing, what's that?
So, you applied an efforts according to implement the policy. Yeah.
Right, but to continue
Yeah.
classification, I also didn't get the idea of what the founder wants in terms of policies, because if there is a stupid policy, but everyone exerts the highest effort to implement stupid policy, is it better than nobody implements efforts in good policy? How we range policies and efforts in this way? So,
Yes.
is it true from what we are saying that our founder doesn't care about what policies he chosen, and the only thing he cares about, or she cares about, is that how much efforts there is put in this particular policy, and he doesn't care about what policies or what?
No, he cares. Okay.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
that's stupid stuff, but
No. Okay, we assume that each professors knows something about different policies, and okay.
I'll
Yeah.
give you an example.
Yes.
Imagine that we have a policy to support research productivity, right?
Yes.
And we say the more research productivity is, the more papers are published. So there are two options to support publishing in Russian journals or support publishing in international journals.
But if I have ability to write only Russian papers, it's better for university if I write good
So
Russian
which means-
papers.
Yeah, which means
but-
there is some utility function for the university, right?
Yes.
Which is not here.
Okay, yes. But so I think that utility function of university depends on the utility function of all professors. So yes. No. Okay.
No,
Okay. Okay, let's go on. Okay. So, lifespan of university is larger comparing to the lifespan of other organization, and policy is chosen. University has to choose policy quite often, and so we try to investigate what will happen if university exists L periods, and in each period policy should be chosen, and we try to compare collegial governance, hierarchical governance without rotation and with rotation. And you might think that hierarchical governance with rotation is not so bad, but let's look what happens. So in this case, we also find out that the collegial governance is better than hierarchical governance with rotation, and collegial governance is better than all other governance structures. And we also compare hierarchical governance with rotation with hierarchical governance without rotation, and we can say that in situation when a founder has to decide whether he appoints one professor for L periods, or he appoints a new professor for each period. His preference depends on his ability to appoint a professor which interest is close to interest of median professor. If he could not do this, hierarchical governance with rotation is better than hierarchical governance without rotation. And
can you
that,
just pull the
so so to summarize, so I tried to compare different governance structure, and I assume that decision in university are made on the basis of the preferences of professors that participate in governance, and the decision are implemented by all professors. And I assume that the founder has not enough knowledge about the preferences of professor, and so under different governance in equilibrium, university chooses different policy, and we can say that the collegial governance is the best, and if the collegial governance is not available for university, the second best choice is to delegate decision to a committee, and also we try to compare hierarchical governance with other hierarchical governance with rotation, with other mechanism of decision, and we can say that collegial governance is better than hierarchical governance with rotation, and also that hierarchical governance without rotation is better than hierarchical governance with rotation only if the university founder can appoint a professor with preferences that close to the preferences of medium professor. So that's all. But since this work in progress, so your comments, suggestions are very welcome.
Any comments or maybe questions?
Let me start
Yeah.
first while everybody else is thinking of her. There was no actually questions, but probably comments.
Okay. Yeah.
First, it's still unclear what the role of the founder is. First, I wouldn't call him or her founder because there's not too many universities in the world who are still governed by the founder, right? And ATCs, in some sense, are happy exception, or some might say it's not so happy, but anyway, that's an exception, and we can't find many universities which are governed by the founder, which means that we probably should call him or her president, or rector president, probably if we can speak about the US model, or to call him in a way that it doesn't mean that he creates the university, or that should be discussed somehow in more detail while we're thinking about the making universities on the scratch. And if it's not the founder, in the founder case, he organizes the university and then delegates the power to professors. But in many cases, we have a case which is vice versa organized. We have professors and different committees which delegates some power to president or rector, and this person is constrained severely or just slightly constrained by the power of professors. So I think that we should be very careful in describing the assumptions, because many people might think that the reference point is the power in the hands of professorship. That because the university, as you mentioned from the very beginning, which is exactly right, is that that's a society of professionals, and that's a distinctive point of university from all other firms. That's first. Second, if you speak about founder or president, I think we should be more clear about what the preferences for him are and how they're organized and how he influences their process. And it might be probably interesting to consider like benevolent president, then we should define what does it mean benevolent. Or some president or, as you say, founder with some preferences toward one policy, which means that probably this person was former academics and still has some ideas. And then he would be happy to make decisions like himself or herself, but he thinks that probably he should include other people in decision making, because in this case decision making will be more efficient for their whole enterprise. And I think it's a good thing to discuss as well, because as you mentioned, that again rightly, there is a symmetry of information between professors and administration, and the problem of delegation of power is that professors know better what to do with the university. Otherwise, they would never be granted any power, right? They are granted just because they know much more better how to that. That's the second. Third, that's about the repeated interactions. I think that it might be interesting to consider the cost of switching from one policy to another one. Sometimes you might probably find a good equilibrium, equilibrium which is interesting to study, because in some cases professors would vote for more inefficient rules or policies, but stable rules. Consider again this situation with publications which you mentioned at the very beginning. Suppose we have bonuses for publication which support mediocre research, and everybody understands that it's not a good thing to support, but everybody votes for continuation of this policy just because everybody get used to it and invested something in this particular policy. And in these cases might be probably interesting to consider whether there should be dictator decision making, who would, like, in the long run do better for the whole enterprise, but might be blocked by the committee because committee is just very short looking guys. That's my point.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Your colleagues, any more comments or questions?
I would like an example of the policy, because I really didn't get what exactly you're modeling.
Okay, so
I think I understood the result. It's unclear, like, I need an example of a situation when the founder or the president chooses something which changes the cost of effort for the professor, because as I saw from the utility functions, basically the choice of the founder changes their optimum. If they maximize their utility, it will be different. The point of maximum will be different depending on what the founder chose. And this is something.
But the founder choose the governance structure. So, and after this utility, this change the utility function of
So the founder chooses the structure, the hierarchy, or the group chooses the policy, but it's very abstract. I just don't. I know nothing about how universities are done. It still makes it clear.
Okay, so for example, professors in humanities prefer to write books, yes, and professors of in mathematician prefer to write short papers in high quality journals. So if I'm a founder and I choose government structure, and I appoint a professor of humanities, and this will change the situation for the professor of in math.
Imagine a very simple case. Just imagine that each professor has like 1 unit of time, and he has preferences on how to distribute this time between teaching and research, right? You want to do more research and want to teach more, and many people have their own preferences. So the question is how the standard contract should look like, because the standard contract will specify how much teaching you do and how much research you do, right? So different people will vote for different distribution. That's a simple example.
But the problem is that then you sum up the efforts of all the professors, and the founder is supposed to maximize the sum.
That was a question of what the founder really wants, and whether he has any preference on the set of policies. That's the question. I think that's the most critical question.
Okay. But I need to think about this.
Any more questions or comments?
And what policies you mentioned and Anya was talking about this model? What university policies you have in mind? just as an example. What associations occur, if any? In what sense? Just money.
I imagine that the president should decide what is the important for university, and if I know what is important, I need to take money. I need to give the money to the person who create this benefit.
I think the main problem in this type of setting is that probably the founder doesn't know what's the best for the university. That's why he delegates something. If he knew, he doesn't need to delegate anything, right? So, I think that probably that's again a kind of complication for the model, but probably it might be interesting to look at the cost of professors in decision making. Because if you sit on the committee, which is the boring stuff to do, right? That takes something from your productive time, and that also creates a whole cost for the founder if he maximizes something as well. So, for example, it might be good to involve everybody in decision making. Yes, and your model demonstrates exactly that. But the question is, what if there are some cost for that? Do we still want to do that or not?
Not. We don't want.
I think that's
We want, in this case, we want to delegate the decision making to a committee. Yeah.
And continuing the Vasily question, I think it might be interesting just for anecdotal evidence and some example for the future paper, just to find some interesting examples of decision making in committees, or some, say, all faculty votes, or dictator decision makers from different countries and different setups, just to illustrate there are a lot of real cases, like some funny examples.
Okay.
About, for example, what kind of food we should have in the university canteen, right? Because we should have healthy food or some junk food. It might be hot food. And that's also influence the productivity.
Any more comments? Yes.
Question: how do you compare this structure? Is it any real data or?
No, it's not. It's modeled. It's not real data.
Okay.
So
It's hard to imagine how will you do it? I don't know how it looks like in modeling.
So I found out the expected sum of efforts and compare, but I also taking into account that the preferences of staff is uniformly distributed. So no.
It's like theory, yeah?
Yes. Yeah.
Any more questions, colleagues? No? Then thank you, Anna.
Thank you.